Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Revelwood webinar series. We're very excited to announce the convergence of TM1 on-premise with Planning Analytics on the cloud in the form of IBM's newest release, Planning Analytics Local. In this first in a three-part series, we'll give you an overview of Planning Analytics Local, as well as a live demo of the Planning Analytics Workspace. First, I'd like to go over a couple of frequently asked questions. Will I be able to get a copy of these slides after the event? And is today's event being recorded for future viewing? The answer to both of these questions is yes. You'll also have the ability to ask questions during the presentation by simply clicking the Q&A menu located on the right-hand side of your screen. Type in your question, hit enter, and we'll do our best to answer them during the webinar or at the end of the session. I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. My name is John Prosisto. I am the Client Success Manager with Revelwood. I have with me Dan Bernatchez, who is our Financial Performance Management Practice Leader and Chief Solutions Architect for TM1. Dan has over 25 years experience in the FPM space, specifically working with TM1 as one of the original founders of Revelwood. Just about our agenda for this webinar. First, we'll go over a brief overview of Revelwood. I'll then hand it to Dan for an introduction to Planning Analytics Local and a demonstration of the add-on Planning Analytics Workspace. Next, as licensing for the Workspace add-on is a separate option, we'll go over a very special pricing offer from IBM good through the end of the year. We'll finish up with a question and answer session. Feel free to submit your questions, and we'll address as many as we can, and we'll make sure to follow up with you individually after the webinar. Just a brief overview of Revelwood. As an IBM Analytics Premier Partner, we cover a broad spectrum of business analytics solutions, but have particular expertise in the Office of Finance, covering all things related to financial planning and reporting. In our 20-year history, we've helped hundreds of Fortune 1000 and mid-sized clients incorporate analytics into their everyday thinking, helping them gain a competitive advantage and drive improved outcomes. We've won several IBM and industry awards and are very proud to have been named the first ever recipient of IBM's Worldwide Customer Analytics Business Partner of the Year at this World's World of Watson conference. With that, I'll pass the presentation over to Dan to introduce you to Planning Analytics Local. Dan?
Thanks, John. Okay, so the purpose of today's presentation is to go over at a high level Planning Analytics Local, which is basically the next release of TM1, and then focus on one of the key differences in TM1 in this release. So to first understand Planning Analytics Local, you have to kind of understand where Planning Analytics kind of came from. So Planning Analytics is the name of the solution that IBM has on the cloud. So when you buy a cloud solution and they provision an environment for you, what you're getting is the TM1 server, which I think everyone on this call is familiar with. That's the multidimensional server that houses the data and the database and the dimensions and so on. And you also get your traditional TM1 web interface, your perspectives interface. You get a cafe interface with Planning Analytics, and you also get this Planning Analytics Workspace environment available to you. That gives you a different way of visualizing the data and a different client interface that you can put on the data. In addition to that, you get Watson Analytics and you get Cognos Analytics as part of that overall solution. So that's that top diagram that's going on. That's where IBM on the TM1 on the cloud was the original implementation. Then they had Planning Analytics. I believe this is an IBM slide. I believe that middle one should actually have BI rather than CA in that little green box. And now, because the CA is the next iteration of the BI product of IBM. So now when you get Planning Analytics on the cloud, you're getting Watson Analytics, you're getting Cognos Analytics, which is the next generation of BI, and you're getting the Planning Analytics environment, which is what everyone understands as traditional TM1 plus this Planning Analytics Workspace. And now with the new release of Planning Analytics Local, you now have the ability to get the Planning Analytics Workspace available to you on-premise as well. So with the next release of TM1, what they're doing is they're giving you the ability to have your traditional TM1 server, your traditional TM1 web interface, the new cafe interface, which is being rebranded as Planning Analytics for Excel, or PAX, they've called it, PAX. and Planning Analytics Workspace available to you on-premise. And you can, they're showing it down below with the Watson Analytics and the Cognos Analytics. You can also install Cognos Analytics locally, and you can have access to Watson Analytics. That's separate from Planning Analytics itself. So the Planning Analytics offering on-premise now is your traditional TM1 environment that you're all familiar with, plus the new PACS or Planning Analytics for Excel environment, plus Planning Analytics Workspace. And this will be packaged so that you have Planning Analytics Express, which would be the iteration of this, which is replacing the old Cognos Express implementation. Again, all the same products. Cognos Express is just the traditional TM1 products plus the traditional Cognos BI products. Now that's going to be bundled into something called Planning Analytics Express. So all of this is available. I actually should have probably deleted the slide because it's kind of redundant, but all of this is available both locally or on the cloud. And it's all the same environment. So if you were locally, you build all of this out locally. You build your TM1 environment out locally. You build your planning workspace interfaces out locally, and you want to move to the cloud. This is all transferable into the cloud. If you're on cloud right now and you build all this information out and you want to bring it back on premise, that's all transferable back on premise. So it's either or. You can have a local or a cloud solution. So what is the big difference between Planning Analytics and your traditional TM1 environment? And it's really these three things. You have Planning Analytics Workspace, which I'm going to do a deep dive in. A relatively deep dive in today, and that's very visual representations of the TM1 data. It's a self-serving web authoring tool, so you can have people who are analysts kind of build out their own dashboards within Workspace. The dashboards are interactive, the visualizations are interactive. It's very visual in nature. The objects can be synchronized, so as I change my selections of my account or my business unit, all the objects can update based on those selections, and we'll be going over that. It's available both via the web, via a web browser, or via a mobile device. And it also is your next generation of a dimension maintenance environment. So when we install Planning Analytics, if you migrate up to this version of TM1, you do need a Planning Analytics Workspace environment to do certain dimension maintenance, because it's required to take advantage of certain dimension maintenance, which I'll cover in a second. But if you want your clients to actually interact with this environment, it is a separate client. It is a separate install, and there's actually separate pricing to it, which we're going to get to later on in the demonstration. So you do need the Workspace environment for some of your administrators and designers to maintain the dimensions, but you don't need it for all of your clients, only if you want those clients to have access to the Workspace environment for the web-based, interactive self-offering environment. The other big change in Planning Analytics is, I believe, hopefully most people on the call understand what Cafe is. Cafe was the next generation of the Excel add-in for TM1. It was originally it's a product that IBM has been transforming into being able to do all of the things that currently the TM1 Perspectives environment does. They are much closer to that. You can do a lot of new things in PACS, which is the next iteration of Cafe. It has a new look and feel to it. It has much more of the Perspectives functionality. It handles dynamic reports. It handles web sheet publishing, so you now publish your Cafe environment up to TM1 Web. And it handles the Workspace integration. What I mean by that is it allows you to create a complex view in Cafe, and that view be available to you to work within in Workspace. So, and I'll cover some of PACS. As John mentioned at the beginning of this is a three-part series of a webinar. Today is to go over Workspace because there's a special offer going on Workspace before the end of the year. We'll be doing other iterations or other parts of this webinar to cover PACS in more detail. And then we're also going to have another webinar to cover hierarchies, because this is the big change in TM1 is its support for hierarchies. So what a hierarchy is in TM1, I believe most people know that TM1's dimension tool or dimension capabilities allow for you to have multiple hierarchies within a single dimension. there's a lot of flexibility in TM1. I can have a managerial hierarchy of my business units. I can also have a statutory hierarchy of my business units for for different types of reporting. And what hierarchies are is they allow you to have independent hierarchies that look to TM1 or look to you as independent dimensions. The key thing here is if you have a dimension that has attributes to it, the easiest one to probably describe is a product dimension, and that each of your product codes has an attribute to it. I have a set of products, and they each have colors, and they each have sizes to them. And you want to analyze cross color and cross size. You're able to do that using independent hierarchies.
Follow along with it.
But you can be able to look at them as separate dimensions, even though technically inside of TM1 they're not quote unquote a dimension. So it's a very flexible way to do multi-dimensional analysis without having to build out all of these separate dimensions. Some of you who may be our clients, you may have models where we have a detail cube to collect your data, and then we've created this analysis cube which allows you to analyze it cross-dimensionally. That was because we needed to do that because TM1 didn't support the concept of hierarchies before. Now we could do all of that all within a single smaller TM1 cube model, save a lot of processing requirements, a lot of RAM requirements, have the model act much quicker, and still have this ability to have a mass amount of dimensional, cross-dimensional analysis built into the cube just by the use of hierarchies. And again, we'll be deep diving into that in other webinars down the road in the first quarter. Okay, so what is Workspace? Some of you probably have seen Workspace in other demonstrations. It's been around for about a year now, available on the cloud. We've done a previous webinar where we covered some of this, but it is a web-based environment that allows you to visualize the data and interact with the TM1 data in a much more visual way. And we've done a fair amount of review of it before. I'll be going over some of that as part of the demo. But realize the way that IBM works with Workspace on the cloud is it's constantly being developed. So they're constantly adding functionality onto it. They basically have a 3-week cycle. So they will go build certain enhancements to the product. They'll build it out. They'll test it, and they will deploy it on the cloud every 3 weeks. So it's constantly being enhanced to the users that are using the cloud environment, and they're going to continue that type of development cycle even as they go into a local environment. So the install of Workspace is going to be installed as a virtual machine on inside of your environment in what's called a Docker. And you're going to have the ability to constantly update it with what is available on the cloud on a regular basis. So there won't be this concept of running, TM1, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. You're going to have the ability to constantly be enhancing your Workspace environment because it's going to be in a constant state of release. So that's their plan. So it's an environment that is again, it's a rich interactive Workspace environment. You can have synchronization and so on, and we'll go into all of that. We'll go into a lot of the features, but it's a different client environment that allows you to interact with the TM1 data. But the development of it from an IBM standpoint is going to be in a constant. Features of Workspace is the ability to chat, to have interactive chatting while you're in a Workspace environment. I'll be going over that, but you can capture chats and have social conversations about a particular workbook. So that can be used if you're going over like a variance analysis, and you actually capture commentary within the Workspace environment. And those chat windows are actually associated with the workbooks that you're looking at. Workspace works over over mobile devices as well. So you can be interacting with either via a traditional browser like Chrome or Internet. So the other aspect of the Workspace environment is that it is eventually, IBM's plan is to make the Workspace environment your development environment as well. As part of that, they have, as part of that initial release, they are focusing right now on dimension and hierarchy management. So you can maintain your dimensions in TM1, you can add elements, you can, manage your consolidation points and so on. But the key part of it is the support of hierarchies and the ability to create hierarchies as I discussed them, where you want to create a hierarchy, an attribute-based hierarchy of your product dimensions so you can actually see things by color and by size and so on. The only modeling environment that will support that feature set is the Workspace environment. So if you want to take advantage of hierarchies when you upgrade to PA local, you have to install the Workspace environment to be able to manage that. So the traditional TM1 Server Explorer and Architect environments will not support the capabilities of building a hierarchy, a separate hierarchy like that. So the only environment that will support that is Workspace. So at a minimum, if you want to work with hierarchies, you have to install Workspace, and your system administrators or the people that maintain your dimensions will need to have access to that Workspace environment. That you get out of the box when you install PA local. There's no extra cost for that. The extra cost comes if you want your end users and the users of your environment to be able to build out Workspace interfaces. That's where the extra cost comes. But the Workspace environment has been built out to be able to do dimension and hierarchy maintenance. I'm not going to go deep into that in the presentation part of it, the demo part of it, but this is the interface that we're talking about. So you're going to be able to pick your environment, pick your dimension. So the model right now is a dimension. I can pick my hierarchy. So a dimension and a hierarchy is a separate thing, right? So a dimension can have multiple hierarchies. So they've actually separated them out. And when you analyze something, you're actually analyzing across hierarchies. That way, one dimension can be multiple. What traditionally was one dimension can be multiple axes on your browsers browsing, because we analyze things by hierarchies. Once you have a dimension and you're looking at it, you can actually maintain the members, you can add members, you can delete members and so on. And in the interface, you can be maintaining the attributes of the dimension elements while you're maintaining the dimension itself. So you can actually be changing these attribute values while you're maintaining the dimension itself. And that you're able to do that with attributes, or you can actually change it so that you're able to actually interact with like cell level security on the fly as well. So in one interface, I can be maintaining my dimension, I can be maintaining my attributes, I can be maintaining my cell level security, all within one user interface. Again, we'll be deep diving into this a little bit later in our webinar series as we get into hierarchies, because we'll have to go into the model maintenance when we do that. So I talked about the fact that Workspace is a constantly evolving development environment. They have a 3-week kind of build-out window on the cloud, and that's going to be available to us when we do the local environment as well. And these are the types of things that they've added recently. They have, and I'm just going to highlight some of these. They have interactive drill down on the charts. They have launches so that you can launch into hyperlink to other sites, your internal internet, external sites if that's applicable to your application. You can navigate. You can, how you have action buttons in TM1 Web. You can have action buttons, navigational action buttons within Workspace as well. Not all the same features, but it's the concept of a navigation action button that can bring up another sheet within the Workspace workbook that you're working with, or it can actually bring up a totally separate workbook. It has a series of other things that are going on. They're constantly enhancing the visualizations that you can do and so on. And they are going to be continuing to go down, and the right-hand pane is the next best things that they're looking to work on. So activities, that's the concept of embedding workflow in Workspace. So manage simple or complex workflow. Grouping things together and be able to expose things to groups of people. The concept of drill through. Some of you use drill through in TM1 today. Right now, Workspace does not support drill through, but they're looking to add that on. And again, so they're going to be continuously enhancing the overall environment on a regular basis. So again, this is just some of the stuff they've done recently. Okay, PACS, or the Excel environment, just to give you an idea of what's changed there. I don't know how many of you have worked with the Cafe environment or seen presentations of it, but they've kind of put a new look and feel to it. And that look and feel is meant to make everything look the same and look like a single product. And there's actually a lot of sharing of code between products now. So in the PACS environment, when you make a selection for a element for a dropdown, that code that you're using is the same code that a workspace environment would use, is the same code that the TM1 web environment is going to use. So it looks the same. It not only looks the same, it actually is the same code that's being used for each of these things. So when I make a selection, it has the same look and feel. So it's not completed yet, but they've done a pretty good pass at making everything interact with each other and have that same kind of cohesive look to it. So the big changes that they've made within the PACS environment is they now support active forms. They've always supported most of the DBR, W, and subdim type of functions in Excel. I think they now support all the functions. They were a couple that they were missing before. They support all the functions, so you can build out your standard TM1 formulas reporting-wise. They're supporting all the spreading methodologies of TM1, and their goal has always been that you can take an old TM1 report, open it up, and it will convert into a PACS report. They feel they're pretty far along there. The one issue they have is on action buttons, and I think I'm going to be covering that in a little bit from a slide standpoint. But what you're seeing here is you're basically seeing a browser. The browser of Server Explorer is external to Excel. In the concept of PACS, the browser is actually embedded inside of Excel itself. So you see that we have a selector here at the top for rows and columns, and we're showing that browse down below it. And because we're embedded in Excel, I can actually have an interactive chart sitting next to it because I'm in an Excel environment, and I can actually have those two things combined. So I can actually combine a browser view with a chart view on the fly. It's a little bit of a change within the PACS environment. This is showing the concept of the selectors and the uniform user experience, or UX. These pop-up viewers of a browser and a pop-up selector box there were on the slightly right-hand side, we're selecting elements. That code is the same code that Workspace works with. So when we install PACS, we actually point it to our Workspace environment, and so they're actually using the same types of set of code. So if IBM does an enhancement and they add a new capability on selecting elements, they update one piece of code, and the PACS environment gets the benefit of that enhancement, and the Workspace environment gets the benefit of that enhancement because it's using the same set of code. That's actually, hopefully, going to really give you the feeling that these environments are actually part of the same overall product. This shouldn't say proposed component name changes. This is an IBM slide. I should have changed that. These are the name changes. So a couple of changes in the PACS environment. What you used to know in Server Explorer as a browse is an exploration in PACS. In the old cafe days, they used to call it a crosstab. They've now settled on the word exploration. So when you're browsing a cube, you're exploring the cube. So that is an explorer, an exploration view. So when I want to just ad hoc to put rows and columns on a view, that is considered an exploration. Then you have dynamic reports, custom reports, and quick reports. So if you've ever worked with active forms in the perspectives environment, that is considered a dynamic report in PACS. If you've built out a DBR-W type of report that's not active forms related, it's just set of DBRs that you've laid out on an Excel spreadsheet, that's considered a custom report. And if you've ever used the old cafe environment and you've created something called a flex view, if you're familiar with that, that has now been rebranded as something called quick reports. And all of these things can be published to the web, and TM1 Web will understand them. So they've really tied together TM1 Web and PACS. PACS is the future. Now, there's some things that PACS doesn't do, and I think I have a slide on that. Yes, okay. So This is kind of where PAX is. It's totally 2013, 2016 tested, both 32 and 64-bit. They will support, it will work with Excel 2010, but they are looking to phase out those users. They don't want to be tied to the 2010 environment. There's a lot of differences in Excel as it went from 2010 to 2013 and so on. It supports all the Windows environments. PAX itself only works with the new PA local version of the TM1 server, because PAX understands hierarchies as well. So I can work with hierarchies within the PAX environment, and because it understands that, it has been coded to only work against the PA local version of the TM1 server. So if you want to migrate to PAX, you actually have to migrate to PA local on-premise. The initial general available release will not support PAX interacting with the Cognos Analytics data sources, because PAX is actually more than just TM1. It actually can interact with other data sources as well, Cognos BI being one of them, but then it does not currently support access to the new version of BI, which is the Cognos Analytics data sources. That's going to be changing. I believe I'm not sure if they're promising a Q1 delivery or that's their target date at this point. The big thing is the middle section of bullets. Your current perspectives workbooks can be opened in PAX. If it has active forms, they will be converted. If it has DVRWs, those will be converted and work. The things that will not work, action buttons will need to be migrated. There's a separate step that needs to be done to have your old action buttons of your perspectives world be converted to PAX buttons. The code involved in that is a little bit different, and you actually have to do a migration of that. And currently, PAX does not support drill-through. It doesn't support cell commentary, so cell-based commentary. And if you ever use the TM1 report feature of TM1 that will loop through a workbook and print out items, that is actually not supported in PAX yet. All of these should say yet, because they are looking to add drill-through and add a print reporting capability, but right now with the current version of PA Local, that's not supported. It does support all of your authentication modes. The one thing that is important to note, Mode 3, which is integrated login, is supported by PAX, but is not supported by Workspace. That type of integrated login is kind of a very different thing. Since PAX is working, because Workspace is working in its own virtual machine, it cannot support the Mode 3 environment. So for those of you who are technical and know your environments, if you're currently using Mode 3 and you want to work with Workspace, we're going to have to either put you into a mixed mode and use the old TM1 authentication, or migrate to like a Mode 5 type of authentication. And we can talk about those details. Okay. And there's more. There's also several enhancements that I've done to the TM1 web environment and the TM1 server. There's a lot of enhancements on the TM1 server from a performance standpoint. Because I lost some time, I'm going to kind of gloss over this to some extent. I'm just going to do it quickly. One of the main things on the TM1 web environment is they have an entirely new component supporting the web environment. It makes the performance of web sheets much faster. The support of much more complex conditional formatting, that's available to you in Excel 2013 and 2016, is available to you and supported in TM1 Web. And you can actually run a TM1 web sheet or the TM1 web environment from an iPad. So it actually is supported in a iPad environment. I'm going to quickly go over and get to the demo part of it. So I'm going to try to quickly kind of go over these things. This is your look and feel to the web has also been changed again, so that what you're looking at in the look and feel and the color scheme to it and the icons is similar to what's is available in the PAX environment and in the Workspace environment. So everything feels like it's one universal product. Hierarchies, I already talked about this to some extent. This is the benefit of hierarchies. We're going to save a ton of RAM It's much more standard. So now the ability for TM1 to be a source database to a lot of the other products that are out there it definitely supports the standards that are out there for other products. And it should make the performance of those cubes where we want to analyze things across many dimensions, the performance should be much quicker because the base cube that's storing the data is actually quite small. We're just using the attributes or the additional hierarchies of a couple of dimensions to analyze by, so the overall performance of the TM1 model should be much quicker. Anyone want to see a demo? So hopefully this part will work. Let's see. I want to share my screen, and I want to share this environment. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. John, I'm going to, since I can no longer see the chat window, so you'll say something if you can't see my screen. So this is Planning Analytics. I'm sorry, this is Planning Analytics Workspace. Sorry, let me get out of this. So what is Planning Analytics Workspace? It is a separate client interface to the TM1 server. So the way it works is you create folders to store information just like you would create a folder to store your Excel spreadsheets. So I have a series of folders here. Those folders can be placed in a shared environment or a personal environment. So you can have you can have your own personal workbooks that no one else can see, or I can place them in a location where more than one person can see it. As the administrator, just like I would be an administrator of a TM1 server, and I can give you access to the objects in the TM1 server, I have the ability to set permissions on workbooks as well. So I can make workbooks available to individuals. So when they come into the workspace environment, maybe if I'm a person who logged in, I only see the car sales folder. I don't see the other folders because I don't have permissions to them. Okay, so you have a series of, in this case right now, we have a series of folders. And within those folders, you have workspace workbooks. I call them workbooks because they're books that actually have tabs to them similar to what you would see in a Excel environment. So I clicked in the SmartCo content. Now I have a series of workbooks. You see the icon's a little different. And so I can select any one of these. Just for the purpose of the demo, I already have some open. So I'm going to go into my OpEx. So this is a workspace workbook. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing a set of tabs, right? So think of this workbook with tabs similar to Excel. And we've exposed the TM1 model on this interface. And let me, hopefully you can still see the interface. If it looks poor, let me know. I'll change the zoom on it. So what I'm looking at, most people who use TM1, they do this for budget purposes, so they would have a data entry template for entering your operating expenses as part of your budget process. And typically we'd have accounts as my rows and time as my columns, and the user would come in, they do their data entry. Well, this is that representation, right? So you'll see here I have my organization here, so I'm the person who's in charge of Massachusetts. I see my operating expenses as my rows, and I see time periods as my columns. So this is a view within my TM1 data, and I can interact with this, right? So I can go to my travel expense, and I can click on it, and I can say, okay, I want that to be $65,000, I want that to be $67,000. I hit enter, and sorry, I was on the wrong cell. I'll explain that in a second. Hello. Okay, not sure why total, I must have a rule below total travel expenses. I could have sworn I could test that before, but so in this case, I just chose meals. So I want to change my meals from 23,000 from whatever, 23,000 to 25,000. I can go here. And because of TM1 spreading methodology, I'm in the year. Even though I typed into a year, it changed the individual month. But the thing to notice here is I have separate objects on the screen, and they're all interconnected. So as I change my interface, what I'm looking at, if I change myself from Massachusetts to Maryland, yeah, my grid of numbers changes, but all of my charts change as well. So what's happening here is I have one view of my data, which is showing a data entry template for my users. I have another view of the data that's been made into a chart where I can see how my monthly expenses are changing over time for my business unit. And I have another chart here showing my actual versus budget versus a predictive model as well. So what we've done is we're just exposing the data into a workspace environment that's much more visual in nature, right? It's the same type of thing I would do inside my Excel environment, but I'm now interconnecting it. I'm making it much more interactive and visual for my end user. And there are several objects available to you to do this, right? We obviously have the ability to put the charts up here. We have this grid type of view with my dimensions as my row and column axes. I have these selector items here that I have the ability to make my selections on my business unit. But I also have these other types of objects. Like down below here, I have this other object here, which is a player, which I think it's called a player. And you notice as I change this, so if I wanted to do a deep dive and what I wanted to look at was my occupancy expenses, if I click on occupancy here, what that does is it changes my view of my data to occupancy and all of its children. So I can change myself to, oh, I want to focus on travel. So I can focus on travel itself. So here's travel and all of its descendants. If I want to focus on office expenses, here's office expenses and all of its descendants. And notice the charts are interconnected as well. So as I change my chart, even though my entire row set changed, I'm now focused on that part of the model itself. And if I go back to total operating expenses, it takes total operating expenses and all its direct children. So I can kind of design things a little bit differently than I would normally do in Excel. I have that capability. I mean, I could have just created a big grid here that had all my operating expenses, drilled down all the way to my individual accounts and said, do your data entry. But in this case, we've combined it with a bunch of other objects so that the user has a bit of a different experience. I just want to make sure I covered all the subjects I wanted to cover on the OpEx side of life. Then, in addition to that, you do have, you'll notice when I was in the payroll environment that we have here is, you notice that the color scheme of these cells is different. That's because these cells are driven via rules, right? This is a financial model. So I have my financial model, and I have a staff model where I have individual employee-level staff, and these are interconnected. But visually, the user knows that, okay, these are coming from a separate model. So I could have had a separate button here so I could launch into my headcount model. I didn't put that there yet. So I already have the headcount model up. So I go here. This is my headcount model. I come in, I put my organization in, I can see my individual employees, I can have all the attributes that I would normally have for my employees. And again, we're combining my low-level detailed employee planning with visualization. So I can visually say, okay, in September, this person's being terminated, or I should say that they're retiring. Let's do a positive event. In September, this person's retiring, so my head count is going from 5 down to 4 in September. I can visually see that. I don't have to look at the grid of information to see that. I can visually see that. So I knew that this was happening, and I can see the impact of that person leaving and the impact on my expenses, the impact on my head count interactively. Again, I'm combining my data entry, my low-level data entry with visualizations of that data itself. So hopefully you're getting an idea of that. Okay, so and again, this goes into a lot of other things where I can see the employee summary. So this is my individual employees, and here's the calculations out of all my salaries, my bonuses, and my medical over time. I can then have another view, which is the total department view. So here's the total department view. Here's in September. You'll notice that this is our drop from 5 in September to 4. And I can see the overall department view. So again, it's it's no different, if you will, than what you're currently doing in Excel and in TM1 Web. It's just a different way of visualizing the data and interacting with the data itself. And you can do it at a very high level, reporting-wise, or you can actually get down to doing individual data entry and creating data entry forms. So the next question people will ask, I believe, is what about all the work I've done in TM1 Web? Is that useful? Can I interact with it? And the answer is yes. So I'm going to go to another interface. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing a TM1 model, right? So I'm looking at a model. I'm having a problem with some of the, I'm looking at a model. Let me close that and reopen it. I'm looking at a TM1 model here, and I have the same thing. I can go down and I can change my selector. I can change myself from Massachusetts, Maryland. But what you're seeing here is not a workspace object. What I'm interacting with is actually a TM1 web sheet. So I can actually embed TM1 web sheets inside of a Planning Analytics Workspace. So you can take what's currently on TM1 Web and embed it in the workspace environment and have users still work with that. And it works fine. In fact, I can actually have a selector. I could have actually put out a selector out here, a TM1 Workspace type of selector off to the right for organizations, and that selector and my web sheet can synchronize to each other. Just like my charts and my grids synchronize in the other environment, I can actually have the selectors that I have in TM1 Web synchronize with the other objects in my workspace environment. So you don't need to have two separate environments, a TM1 Web environment for X people in X interface and a workspace environment. They actually can be combined and interact with each other inside of one environment. Okay, the other thing is, this one. I'm not sure how many people on the call have used metrics inside of TM1 and the use of metrics and scorecarding and so on. But Workspace has been designed to interact with those cubes, and there's been several concepts of the visualizations of that make it much easier to interact and show and work with the metrics cubes that TM1 allows us to build. And this is a representation of that. So when I'm looking at a metrics cube, and I'm looking at my different metrics that I'm tracking, in our case, gross revenue, cost of sales, and so on, and I have my actuals and my targets and my variance, and the concept of status and the traffic lighting that you see on the status column here and the trending column. So how is this metric trending over time? Right. So the status of this individual time period in 2015 is the status of this is poor, the status of this is good. But trending over time in prior time periods, it has been trending down over time, and this one has been trending up over time. But this one is good this month, but it actually has been trending down prior to this. So you're good now, but you were trending down prior to this. So all of this visualization is kind of pre-built into Workspace. When you're looking at a metrics cube, it will visualize itself like this because it understands what a metrics cube is and what a metrics set of measures are. So you can interact with your metrics and make them much more visual within the Workspace environment. In addition to that, the Workspace environment is set up to work with strategy maps. So this is the concept of taking your metrics and grouping those metrics together for goals, right? So my revenue and expenses are metrics that I'm tracking, but those revenue expenses impact profitability, and profitability impacts my increase in earnings per share. My increase in earnings per share impacts my increase in shareholder value. I'm walking through the tree on the right-hand side from bottom up. So I have I group my metrics into revenues and expenses. Those metrics impact my profitability. That impacts my earnings per share. Earnings per share impacts my shareholder value. And then it gets into, I want to meet my overall plan to market. And as you interact with these items, you can actually see the metrics that are impacting and why. So in my overall plan, I have 8 metrics that are in good shape. I have 2 metrics that are in warning sign. I have 6 metrics that are in poor shape. It shows me what those metrics are. so you can kind of interact with your strategy map itself. So the workspace environment has been optimized to work with these metrics cubes and the metrics strategy maps. Okay, I'm going to quickly go into the concept of hierarchies as well. So this is similar to what we've already looked at before. It's a grid of numbers, a grid looking at my car sales over time, and I've put together a couple of visualizations of that information. And you notice what we're looking at here is we're actually looking at colors and engine size and engine types. But if I look at this model, I'm actually going to go under the hood here a little bit, and I look at the model itself, what I'm seeing is I have a sales cube, and this is the dimensionality of that sales cube. It's version, region, product, account, and time. There's no engine size, there's no engine type, there's no color. What it is my product dimension has attributes in it, right? I'm a car company and I'm selling cars, and cars have different engine sizes and engine types in them. So for each of my car types, I have an attribute for engine size and an attribute for engine type and an attribute for color. And I can now, even though I only have one dimension in TM1, I can analyze things across engine size and engine type, right? So you'll notice I'm going to go into my Explore data here. So here's that same set of data, right? And here's my engine size. I can actually be looking at engine size, right? And I can be looking at color, right? So now I'm analyzing now across engine size and engine type. Those are from the same dimension, the same product dimension, and I'm analyzing cross-dimensionally, columnar and rows from the same dimension itself based on the attributes. It's a really cool concept. We'll dive deeper into it in a subsequent webinar. But just so you understand, that's what we're talking about when we talk about hierarchy. The last thing I want to go over is just give you an idea of like all of the visualization capabilities of TM1 of Planning Analytics Workspace. Right, so we have area charts and bar charts. I'm going to quickly go through these because I think I'm running out of a little bit of time because of some of the problems we had. We have column charts, we have heat maps, we have line charts, we have obviously the explorations, which we talked about before. We have line and column charts. Oops, sorry, map chart got messed up. Packed bubble charts, pie charts, radial charts, point charts. And these visualizations are constantly being updated and constantly being added to. We have stack column, stack bar. We have tree maps where the size of the box is, kind of determines the size of the number behind it. We have word clouds, so I can, here I've taken the larger the word, the larger the data value. So you can really visualize your data in a lot of different ways. And as I said, we also have the concept of metrics and working with the metrics chart. One of the other things about the metrics chart is you can actually do a visualization like this. Again, I'm gonna bring my zoom down a little bit. I can actually interactively change the time period that I'm looking at. Sorry. So I can actually change the time period I'm looking at with the metrics chart. So I can be looking at, only a couple of months, or I can be looking at an entire year, and it'll actually change the chart interactively for me. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of go back to the presentation, I hope. Hopefully that gave you a good flavor of what Workspace is and what it can do. So now let's talk about the offer that's on the table. So the offer that's on the table, or the concept is, Workspace is a separate environment, right? It is a separate client interface, and there is a price to it. So if you want to have Workspace available, so as I said, when you install PA Local, you will install Workspace. And by installing Workspace, you'll have the ability to maintain hierarchies, maintain dimensions, and so on. And so it gives that ability. But if you want to build out an entire Workspace environment to have users interact with it, you have to purchase those licenses to allow users to do that. And this is the cost. So for contributor users, people who will be writing back to the environment, it's $590 per user. For Explorer users, people who will only be exploring or consuming data, not writing back to the environment, it's $250. That's for the TM1 base. And if you're a Cognos Express user, the price is $310 for PM users. This is where licensing gets to be different. And for the PM and BI users with Workspace, it's $450 a user. And right now, if you purchase PA Local, if you want to purchase PA Local and purchase Workspace Environment, if you do it now before the end of the year, you'll get a 75% discount on those prices. But that's only through 12/31/2016. So you just take these numbers, divide it, multiply it by 0.25, and that's your price per user. So if you had 100 TM1 contributor users, normally that would be $59,000. Right now you can purchase that for $14,750. Commonly asked questions on this: can I purchase for some of my users and not others? The answer is no. If you have a 100 user TM1 license, you're purchasing 100 Workspace users. You can't say I want 20 only to be Workspace. Do I get PA Local if I don't buy Workspace? I already answered that. The answer is yes. So if you don't buy the Workspace environment, if you went to PA Local, you get PA Web. So you get TM1 Web. You still get TM1 Perspectives because it's still there. Because PACS, if you don't want to move to PACS or you want to migrate to PACS over time, it's still available to you. So you get TM1 Web, you get Perspectives, you get PACS, and you get the Workspace environment to maintain your hierarchies, but you just wouldn't be able to use the Workspace environment for your end users. If you don't have the funds available before 12/31, you can actually use IBM's global financing and defer your payments over time. Interest-free, no less. If you add more users in the future, so through the end of next year, so let's say you did this purchase and you converted 100 TM1 users and you want to add another 10 next year, you can actually add those 10 still at a 45% discount. So if you take advantage of this offer now, it actually can pay for itself now, and even if you added users on in 2017. And as I talked about, admin and model users get Workspace for free. That's because you need that to be able to maintain hierarchies and dimensions. Must be on. Oh, right. So you have to be up. You have to be up on your maintenance, up to date to take advantage of this offer. You can't be running 9.1 of TM1 and never paid your maintenance IBM and take advantage of this offer. For those of you who might want to do that. Now I'm going to pause. I know I ran a bit late. I apologize for some of the technical disruptions we had. Hopefully this was useful to people. I don't know if we have any questions that are out there that came in while I was talking.